Here we go.
Today, we're going to look at 3 places you can't go and people who went there anyways. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak in to the like button's house in the middle of the night and burn several bags of microwave popcorn. Also, please subscribe to our channel
I
and
thought
turn
he's
on
about
all
to say
notifications so you don't
manure
miss any of our
bags
weekly
of manure
uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
or feces. Trying to keep it somewhat clean because YouTube tripping. Trying to be like Disney now, I guess. Some
On
stuff.
February 15th, 2004, 2 police officers drove down a quiet street in a little English village called Murrow, and they pulled over in front of this little brick bungalow. Earlier that day, a neighbor who lived on this street had called the police to report hearing a strange digging sound coming from inside of this bungalow. And so these
That sounds
officers had been
ominous.
sent out to see what the sound was and make
Digging
sure the
sound.
occupants of this home were okay. Now, these 2 officers were not particularly worried about the occupants of this house. They assumed that some wild animal must have snuck in while the owners were away, and that was all this was. But as they would quickly
Assumptions of the
learn, that was not the
motherfuckers.
case. After climbing out of their
How
car,
long has
the
it
two
been?
officers
Okay,
just
it's been long
stopped
enough.
and listened for a second to see if they could hear this digging
I can
sound.
curse now.
But the bungalow was quiet, the street was quiet, and so the 2 officers shut their car doors and made their way up to the front porch of this bungalow and knocked on the front door. After a few moments, when nobody answered, one of the officers reached down and tried the handle and found it was unlocked. And so he opened the door just a crack and he called out through this opening in the door into the bungalow saying, "Hey, it's police, we're here to check on you." But when no one called back to them, the officer opened the door the rest of the way, and immediately both officers saw there was a huge problem inside
dead
this
body.
house.
That's
The
the
entire
problem.
first floor was flooded with several inches
It's
of water.
flooded.
And they could hear from somewhere in the back of the property the sound of running water. And so again, both officers called out into the
That's one thing when you like in your apartment or house and you come down your stairs or out your bedroom or something, or if you wake up and it's in your room and you just see like probably like 6 inches of water. And you just that happened here some years back. It was like the sunk pump went out and it was storming like really bad. And some point just happened to go out right then. Well, actually, some point didn't go out that time. Some because this was a different time where it didn't flood that it only flooded in the crawl space. At this time, the power went out because it was a really bad storm. It was like a tornado somewhere near here. I think it was like 5 miles away or some shit like that. Electricity went out, and it was out for about 3-4 days. And got a generator. I bought one, and but the sump pump went out. We just ran on electricity, and all that water back up out of the crawl space into my den. And I was like, because first I didn't notice it because it was carpet on the floor until I stepped on the carpet and it made this like sound. And when I picked my feet up, it was just you could see where the water was at in the carpet. It just saturated all the whole carpet. All I was like, oh. And then I looked in what the crawl space was. It was about because it's about a lip from in the crawl space to when you coming out, about like this, about this high. It's probably about 2 inches, maybe an inch and a half. It really was about 2 inches. It was over that, going over that, coming out, spilling out. Oh man, when you see that, it's just when you see water where it's not supposed to be water. First, it's just you feel angry, and then rage starts to come in, and then when you know you can't do anything about it, you got to call somebody, and then we'll be there tomorrow or something. It's like you just feel defeated.
his house to try to get the attention of anyone who might be inside. And when again they were met with silence, the officers walked into the flooded house and began walking straight back towards this running water sound. And eventually, after walking through the living room, they entered this hallway that went right to the back of the property. And as soon as they were in it, they could see there was an open door at the end of the hallway on the left. And it seemed like the running water sound was coming out of that room. And so the two officers, one
There's
by
somebody
one,
dead in the
sloshed
tub.
down this hallway to this room. They turned left, looked inside, and what they saw completely shocked them and immediately sprung them into action. 2 months before these officers came to this bungalow and found
That's where I pause it is. I just looking at him, and I remember seeing some stuff. I think he's a former Navy SEAL, and just looking at him like you wouldn't like me personally. If I saw him in the street, I wouldn't feel the least bit intimidated if I didn't know him. But knowing that he was a former Navy SEAL, it's like this person has a completely different type of training that most people don't have. I mean, you could say it was mostly like weapons training stuff, but he also has some uh, hand-to-hand combat training as well, which a lot of people don't have in general. I mean, some people, train in different martial arts and stuff, but this man was trained to go to war, and you just look at him, you wouldn't think that, you know. Like I've been around quite a few, like people in the Navy SEALs, Green Berets, stuff like that, TAC Ps, combat control and stuff like that, and some of them look like you like, okay, this dude look like he dangerous, but then some of them are so like unassuming, and you like they got the same training these other guys, but these dudes could fuck you up. It's like, but you don't know that because they don't look like intimidating. And just looking at him just now, I just like sometimes like I watch his stuff and then I just think like this dude was a former Navy SEAL.
it flooded with water. The owner of this bungalow, 51-year-old Ronald McClagish, had broken up with his girlfriend. And this breakup was really hard on Ronald. He was already
The
divorced. He was
hair
totally broke. He
gotta
had
be the
loads of
80s
health issues like
or
bad
early
asthma.
90s.
He had some liver issues, and just generally, he was someone who was kind of physically frail. And so this girlfriend had
Damn.
been one of the very few good things in his life. And now she
Frail,
was
got
gone.
health issues, ain't got no money, and
So
ain't got
very
no
quickly
pussy.
after this breakup, Ronald fell
Damn.
into a very dark depression. And so for 6
Shit, I
weeks
would
after
too.
they broke up, Ronald, for the most part, just stayed in bed and kind of moped around his bungalow, kind of feeling bad for
Like I'm
himself.
like, bro,
But then finally,
I
at the
got
end of
my
those
health,
first 6 weeks
and I
after the
mean,
breakup, Ronald
I
decided
ain't
he wanted to
hurting
get
for
his life
money,
back
but
together and just
you
move
could
on.
always use some
So
more.
on February 1st, 2004, so roughly 2 weeks before those two officers would come to his bungalow because of this digging sound, Ronald would wake up feeling determined to start anew. And the first thing he was going to do was purge his bungalow of anything that was his ex-girlfriend's. She left a lot of things behind when they broke up. She had not collected them. And so now they were just
She
kind of
don't care about
sources
that
of
stuff.
pain. And where most of her stuff was inside of Ronald's bungalow was
Either
in
that
this
or she was
closet
planning to
in one
come
of the
back.
bedrooms at the end of the hall. So that morning, Ronald headed down the hall. He turned left into the bedroom. He opened up the closet. He went inside, and with a trash bag in hand, he began rifling through everything in this closet, and anything that was hers, he would take it and put it right into the trash bag. And at some point, when Ronald was almost done pulling the last few things of his girlfriend's out and into the trash bag, from behind him, he heard this strange sound coming from the bedroom. It sounded like wood bending or creaking. But before he could turn around to see what the sound was, the door to the closet he was in slammed shut with incredible force. And suddenly, Ronald
That's the
was trapped
girlfriend.
inside of this closet.
She's in
total
cahoots.
darkness. Now, Ronald was likely shocked at first, But he would have reached and tried for the handle and found that no matter what he did, he could not open this closet again. And so Ronald began screaming for
And
help,
they
pounding on the
barricaded that
door,
fast?
but nobody came to help him. The closet that Ronald was in was fairly tall, but it was only 2 feet wide by about 2 feet deep, which meant Ronald could only stand inside of this closet. He couldn't sit down, he couldn't bend down, he literally was trapped standing. And Ronald didn't have
Damn.
water.
Oh
He
yeah, he
didn't
did
have
say it was
food.
two
He
feet
knew that no
deep.
one was going to be checking on him anytime soon. And even though his bungalow was kind of small and shabby, it was built out of brick. And so the likelihood that his calls for help were penetrating outside loud enough that people could hear them and that they would come in and rescue him was pretty slim. And so at some
Man, I'd have
point
put
that
a hole in
evening,
that
Ronald
damn door.
realized he needed to do something different if he was going to get out of this closet.
So he
And
did
so
say the guy was
above him
frail,
were a
so he
series
might
of
not have the
pipes across
strength.
the ceiling. And so he reached up and he grabbed one of them
Oh,
and he broke it off.
it's one of
He was
them a water
thinking
pipe.
that with this pipe, maybe he can burrow a hole in the wall and crawl through to another room, or maybe he can punch a hole in the door and somehow unlock it, or at a minimum, with the metal pipe, smashing it against the wall or the door would be louder than any noise he could make by yelling. However, the second he broke that pipe
It's
off
a
the
water
ceiling,
pipe.
something horrible happened. The pipe he broke was a water pipe. And as soon as it was broken, icy cold water began
Because I was like,
pouring
he said it
down
was water on the
directly on
floor.
top of Ronald's head and face. And again, because he can only stand basically in the
Damn.
middle of this closet, he couldn't get out of the way of this water. It was like he was under a waterfall and couldn't go anywhere. And so he likely
Jeez.
tried to ignore the water and tried to use the pipe and screamed
Wouldn't
and
that,
did anything he could to get someone to.
like, if he's stuck in his closet, wouldn't that, because if his water, continuous water run down, I mean, I'm guessing he says freezing water. I mean, hypothermia might set in. But wouldn't that, like, saturate your skin after a while and cause, like, your skin to, like, start, like, getting really mushy? And I remember reading something about someone's skin, like, came off. But I think they were, like, completely submerged away, but it was a body. And the skin, like, when you grab it, you could, like, just basically, like, it's like paper, like a paper bag, it just comes off.
Know he was in here, but no one could hear him, and so it was like he was being tortured with this freezing water, and he's in this tight claustrophobic space. It's total darkness, and he's totally panicking. And for days and days, that would be Ronald's nightmarish reality. But despite how terrible his circumstances were, Ronald continued to use that pipe to both smash the walls to make loud sounds. He also began burrowing into the walls, trying to make a hole. But Ronald was getting weaker and weaker. He became very sick. And also, because the water was constantly hitting his head and face, his skin got so saturated that literally his skin started falling off. It basically opened up into these sores and began to sag, and the water just began brushing his skin off. And so finally, after about a week of being trapped in this closet in these terrible conditions, Ronald realized help was not going to come in time.
Like,
and so he put
Final
his head
Destination,
down, kind of slumped up against the wall, and then closed his eyes. Ronald's neighbor, who called the police, actually did hear Ronald using that pipe to try to dig a hole in his wall, and she heard Ronald smashing the pipe on his door, and she
body must have been on
muffled
fire.
shrieks and yells. But she didn't know what they were and kind of just decided it wasn't her business. But when Ronald's house went from all these strange sounds to silence, that was when she called the police and said, hey, I had heard some digging sounds coming from the bungalow, and now I don't. And so when those two police officers arrived at Ronald's bungalow...
That seems ass backwards. To, like, I hear a bunch of noise and screaming and shrieking and banging and sound like some digging, and then all of a sudden it stops. So before that, when you heard the noise, you're like, that's not my problem. But then after it goes quiet, then you like, okay, well, maybe I should call the police. I could kind of understand that because when I watch my nieces sometimes, they do that where they just screaming at the top of their lungs. laughing. You hear them playing and not playing with their toys or knocking stuff over, or they done turn their tablet all the way up when they watch. I have them watch like educational videos and stuff, teach them different things. And then when I'm like, okay, I hear them, and that's fine. The second I don't hear anything, then I go check. Or if I hear like a kind of a cry that sounds like pain, then I go check. Like, oh, they jumped off the bed or some shit. Or they arguing with one another and they start crying because the other one didn't get their way. And I go check, especially if I go dead quiet, I go check and say, oh, they fell asleep. Or if something came on TV and they just watching it. That's usually what it is. But that's one thing that's different because it's not like screaming and shrieking. And plus, it's like he's a grown man that lives there. And he's shrieking, screaming, banging. You hear something sound like digging. And you don't even go knock on the door to be like, hey, man, you all right in there? Like, to see if he answered the door. It just seems a little ass backwards to me.
They went inside, they went down the hallway, they went into the bedroom where Ronald had gone, and they saw this huge wardrobe, which is a big wooden piece of furniture, toppled over right in front of the closet. And
Oh,
at the bottom of the
somebody
closet,
barricaded
they
him in there.
saw two human feet protruding from underneath that little space at the bottom of the closet. Those feet belonged to Ronald. He had managed to force his feet underneath the closet, but of course, he could not have fit underneath the closet door. And so the two police officers rushed over, and together they barely were able to get this wardrobe off of the closet door. And when they opened the door up, Ronald was in there. He was deceased. His body was still in a standing position, kind of rigid and propped up against the wall, and freezing water was still pouring down onto his head. It would turn out no one had intentionally trapped Ronald. Instead, his wardrobe was just unstable and it happened to topple over.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is definitely some Final Destination type shit. The wardrobe just unstable and just happened to fall over in front of the door while he's in the closet.
In 1900, an 18-year-old named Thomas Pedler told his mother
Tell
that
him
he was going out for a bit,
you don't believe in
but
fate.
back
That
in time
like
for turkey that afternoon, and then
that's a
grabbed
good
his jacket,
story
his
that
coat,
convinced
and headed
somebody.
out the door.
Sheesh.
Thomas lived in a very working-class neighborhood in San Francisco, California,
1900.
where generally speaking, nothing big really ever happened. It was kind of a place where people just worked, and that was it. But on this day, something huge was happening in Thomas's neighborhood. The big football game between Stanford University and the University of California was taking place at the stadium in
November
Thomas's
29th.
district. And they were expecting over 20,000 people to cram into this stadium. And so Thomas was not about to miss this incredible spectacle, even though he didn't have enough money to buy a ticket. But he knew he would find a way
Tickets
to
probably
watch
like
this game.
15
so Thomas
cents
leaves his
back
house
then.
and he runs to the stadium, which was not far from
Oh, yeah,
his
the
house.
people that only make
and he
like
waited in front of
5
the front
cents a
gate,
day.
where all these people are
A week.
streaming in to go into the stadium. And around 11 a.m., Thomas's very close friend Charles, who was also a young man, made his way to the front gate. The two met up, and at first, their plan was to try to sneak in with the horde of people that were making their way into the stadium. But even though they were still hours away from the opening kickoff of this big game, it was at 2:30 p.m., the stadium was packed. I mean, there was nowhere to sit, there was nowhere to stand. People that had tickets who were going in are looking around thinking, where are we going to watch this
Everybody
game?
in suit.
And so Thomas and Charles
That was
were kinda like,
the
well,
casual
what's the
clothes
point
back
of
then. Just
sneaking
casual
in if
suits.
there's nowhere to watch? And so they decided, okay, we need
Wear
to
your
find
third
another way
best suit
to watch
instead of
this
your
game. And so
second
they
or
began
first.
looking around, and they noticed there was a huge fence that lined the perimeter of the stadium. And they saw there was some people kind of climbed up on this fence trying to get a view down onto the field. And pretty quickly, when Thomas and Charles decided they would try to do that too, they saw that all the good spots on this fence were already taken. The spots that were open provided no view onto the field. And so that option as well didn't work. And so Thomas and Charles are frustrated. They're starting to worry that they will not see this big game. But when they walked back over to the front gates of the
It's
stadium,
a
they happened
college
to
game.
notice across the street was this group of people rushing over to this big white brick factory building. And they were literally placing ladders up against the sides of this building and beginning to climb up it. I mean, this is a 5-story building, and they are just basically free climbing the windows and the fire escapes. And Thomas and Charles realized that the top of this factory was flat and provided a perfect view down onto the field. And so all these people, they're trying to get a good seat
Damn,
to
that's a
watch
lot
this
of people.
game. And so without any hesitation,
Oh,
Thomas and
is
Charles
the roof
decide
gonna
they're going to do
collapse?
that too. So they left the stadium,
Because it's
they
not
ran
made to
across the
handle that
street,
type of
and they
weight.
began climbing up the ladders and climbing the windows and the fire escapes until finally they made it onto the roof.
All
55
these
feet off the
accidents.
ground.
Yeah.
And when they got up there wasn't
Ooh,
that many
55
people. And
feet.
so Thomas and Charles were able to run right over
That's
to the front edge of this building
you could
and
survive
claim a
that,
spot
but
with an
you definitely
absolutely
gonna break
perfect
something.
view of the game. A couple of hours
That's
later,
some
at
internal
2:30
injuries.
p.m., when the game actually started, the rooftop that Thomas and Charles were on was now completely packed with people. Hundreds of people
Yeah.
have climbed up onto this factory. There were some factory workers down below telling people, do not do this. Do not climb on top of this factory. It's not safe. But nobody
Yeah,
listened
it's
to
not
them.
made for no
And the police
100
didn't
people to
notice
be
this
up
was
there.
happening, or they didn't care. And so there's all these people that are on this roof. They're all super excited, and the game
Especially
has
not in a
begun.
warehouse.
It's 2:30, and as soon as the game started, it was like the crowd in the stadium, which could be heard very easily from this rooftop, just kind of erupted, and there were all these bands playing in the stadium. I mean, it was chaos down below, and it really caught on the roof. All these guys, including Thomas and Charles, they're getting amped about this game. They're singing, they're chanting, they're screaming, they're
Funny,
yelling.
all these people
it's
are
total
dead now.
chaos, and Thomas and Charles loved it. But about 20 minutes into the game, as Thomas and Charles are enjoying
sun
themselves
died
and the crowd is
soon
still going
enough.
wild, a dull cracking sound could be heard coming
Yep.
from one side of this
The
roof.
roof about
And
to
so Thomas
collapse.
and Charles, they kind of spun around to see where this cracking sound had come from, and when they began looking out
They
across
are
the sea of people,
too late.
they noticed on the far side of the roof where the sound had kind of come from, they could see people scrambling to get off the roof. But before Thomas and Charles and
I would've
the
just
other
jumped
people
off.
around them who were watching this happening could figure out what was going on, there was a much louder cracking sound, and suddenly the floor underneath Thomas, Charles, and everybody else collapsed. And immediately, people on this roof fell all the way to the bottom of this factory, 55 feet below. There weren't loads of floors inside of this factory. Instead, it was basically just one big building, 55 feet high, that housed this brick structure right in the center of the factory that was almost as tall as the entire factory. It was almost like the factory was a shell around this brick smaller structure right in the middle that was like 40 feet tall. And so after the ceiling collapses, Thomas, he falls, but miraculously, he lands on a wooden beam that stretched across the entire factory, like a support beam, and he grabbed onto it, saving himself from falling all the way down. And so Thomas, he only fell maybe 5 feet, so he was okay, but he didn't have a great grip on this beam. He was holding on, but just barely. And so Thomas, he turns and he's looking around at what's happened below him, and he's hearing people screaming, and he's hearing the sounds of people running around trying to help those who have hit the ground on the bottom. And Thomas immediately begins scanning for Charles, and he finds him. Charles was one of the other fairly lucky people, at least in Thomas's mind. Charles seemed lucky, because instead of falling from the...
I'm curious about. He said this was a warehouse. And he said there were workers there telling people don't go on the roof. It's not safe. Are there workers in there? Inside the place? Did these people fall in there? You imagine a human body weighing like I don't know, in the 1900s, probably like early 1900s, probably like 120, 130 pounds, maybe a little bit more. I mean, because you did have big people even back then. Were just falling and landing on you, just from that height. So, you just and then the ceilings collapsed too. So now you got debris falling as well. Like, oh, I guess. I mean, he didn't mention any workers. I hope the workers are okay.
roof all the way to the ground, Charles and 15 or 20 other people had fallen right onto that brick structure that kind of made up the main part of this factory.
What is this
And so
brick structure?
Charles
He
had only
keep
fallen maybe 10 or
emphasizing on
15
this.
feet onto this structure. And so Thomas is thinking, oh, Charles and these other people, they've survived this fall. They're okay. However, the second Charles and the others, who supposedly were saved by landing on this brick structure, the second they hit that brick structure, despite not suffering catastrophic injuries like broken bones and horrible internal injuries, these people on the brick structure began letting out these primal screams, these just horrible, blood-curdling screams, and as they did, these loud popping sounds began coming out of their...
Oh, I just realized what this. When he said loud popping sound, it's a furnace. Oh, is this like a metalworks place? Or, but those things that used to have like, because I've been in places like that, have like metal, where they used to have small furnaces. Well, not like the size, almost like the building. Cause he said like this, the furnace was, he said because the building is 55 feet high. He said the furnace was like 40 feet. And he said it was pretty large. But that's a furnace. Cause he said they stopped popping. They catching fire. Cause the furnace is so hot. Oh shit. That's crazy. You fall through the ceiling onto something and then you fall onto a goddamn furnace. Oh,
body,
man.
and then their bodies began contorting forward, almost like a bug rolling up onto itself.
Yeah.
It would turn out this factory was not a normal factory. This was a glass factory.
Oh,
and
shit.
in order to make glass, you need to
Yeah, you need heat
sand
sand.
and some other chemicals up to extraordinarily high temperatures.
Oh, yeah, that shit is hot. I know it's like 1,000 degrees to make, because I watch some glass making videos sometimes. I ain't in a while, but I used to back in the day a lot. And I know because I've seen them, because they've been so hot, they had to use like big long metal rods to like, put the glass in the furnace and work it to heat it. Basically, well, not the glass, but to heat it up so it turns into glass. And I've kind of seen them using big long metal rods. Oh man, they fell on top of it. Even if you fell on top, because I know the furnace is probably not as hot as the flames, but it's probably close. Like maybe, if I would be generous, I'd say it's at least half the temperature of the actual fire.
You need a furnace that can literally burn hotter than lava. And so that brick structure that was housed in the middle of this 5-story tall factory was a glass furnace, and it was on. And so even though the inside of this furnace was the hottest place, it was over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the outside of this furnace, where Charles and the others had landed, believing they were saved from this 55-foot fall to their death,
Believed you were saved for like
extremely hot, so hot
few
that
seconds.
the factory workers couldn't even go near the furnace, even with special equipment on. The way they worked with this furnace was with these long metal pokers. They would work the flames and the glass at a distance.
Yeah.
And so the instant that Charles and the others landed on the top of this furnace, they began to light on fire. Those snapping sounds that were coming out of their bodies was the sound of them instantly igniting on fire. And so Thomas and the others who had initially survived this horrible collapse watched as Charles and the others shrieked and shrieked, and their bodies continued to contort, and they continued to burn and smolder, and Charles actually
I'd be trying to get off that thing,
so
I guess.
tightly that his body began to roll down the curved side of this furnace, and at some point his body slipped into a crack in the furnace, and he actually fell into the flames inside.
Damn, how big was that crack?
Around the time that Charles and the others stopped shrieking, a number of people just out on the road heard the commotion, and they came inside, and one of them was Thomas's father. And in a terrible twist of fate, he actually looked up and saw his son clinging to the beam, Thomas.
Oh,
Except it
Thomas.
was
Okay, I
so
thought Thomas
hot
the one
inside
fell
of
in
this
the furnace.
factory that Thomas was sweating, he was losing his grip, it was really hard to hold on to this beam, and his father watched as Thomas lost his grip and fell the 10 more feet down onto the furnace
Oh,
exterior. He landed feet first, then he fell onto his stomach and his face. He immediately ignited on
oh,
fire, began shrieking, and then went silent. All told, 23 people would be
damn.
killed during this roof
Oh,
collapse,
damn, this is a
and
real
dozens and
gravesite?
dozens more would be horribly injured and disfigured. This collapse goes down as one of the very worst disasters in sports history. However, on this day, the crowd inside the stadium was so caught up in the
They
game
didn't
that they
notice it.
actually didn't notice this
Yeah.
horrible tragedy taking place just
How could
100
they?
feet away from where they were. It wasn't until the end of the game, when the winning team's
Damn.
fans carried their players in this kind of spontaneous parade out of the stadium to celebrate, that they walked out onto the street and saw all these
Just-
burnt up, rolled up corpses of the people who had landed on the furnace.
Damn. That's crazy because you like. Because the first guy, he fell through the roof and immediately landed on the furnace and immediately died. Because it sounded like they catch fire like that in like a few seconds. The other guy is holding on and it's so hot that he's sweating in it. He's holding on to a wooden beam and he can't hold on any longer. And he's sweating until he loses his grip because he already didn't have a good grip to begin with. He loses his grip, sees what he already saw what happened to these people, and he knows that that's about to happen to him. Like, oh man, that is rough. Ooh, you know you about to fall and just because I was thinking like, won't they try to get off of? But if you landing on something, I mean that's like, because he says hotter than lava. Because even if the outside is, let's just say it's half the temperature, let's say it's 4,000 degrees, you're talking about 2,000 degrees. As soon as you hit that, you going to like, it's going to start, you're going to start probably igniting. I was like talking about landing near lava. Because even when you too close to lava, you can, depends on like how close you are, you can spontaneously combust. You know, it's, oh man, that is all for a goddamn football game.
In April of 1979, a 69-year-old woman named Monica Myers was appointed mayor of a little village called Betterton in the U.S. state of Maryland. Betterton used to be this very fancy resort town on the water where people from Baltimore and Philadelphia would come there for vacations. They had fancy hotels and restaurants and shops. But by the time Monica became Betterton's mayor, Betterton had kind of gone downhill. People had stopped coming to Betterton. All the hotels shut down or
They're
were
like,
abandoned
Betterton
or burned
better get their
down.
shit
The summer
together.
homes of the rich people from the big cities, those got sold off. And down at the beach, all these glamorous boardwalks literally just kind of crumbled into the sea. And in their place were all these shanty towns where homeless people set up their camps. But Monica had grown up in Betterton, and so she really loved the town and wanted to improve it. And so when she became mayor in 1979, she really leaned into her new role way more.
That was the
than
same
other mayors
time
would.
that
Instead of managing the village from an
Pamela
office,
Voorhees
like
was
most
killing
mayors would
teens
do,
at Camp Crystal
Monica
Lake.
literally
Oh, wait a
went
minute.
out in town and just
Oh, was that
began
1980?
doing lots of jobs around the town.
That was
for free.
1980, not
She would ride
1979.
around with the police and literally stop crimes in action. One time, she stumbled across someone looting a vacant hotel, and she personally got out, chased this person down, and made them put everything back that they had taken. She would pick up trash on the beach. She would do random
Damn.
repairs on people's homes and businesses all over town. And sometimes she would just go door to door asking people how they were doing.
Yeah,
and so
she
very
sound
quickly, the people
badass
of
as
Betterton
fuck.
really grew to love Monica, and they loved seeing her every single day just out and about making Betterton a better place. And so, on March 20th, 1980, roughly 1 year into Monica's tenure as mayor, it was immediately noticeable to the people of Betterton when Monica was nowhere to be seen.
I'm about to
That
say,
day,
I
she
hope
did
she don't
not
get
go to the
killed, but then
police
I was like,
station in
these
the
are
morning like
accidents,
she
so
normally did. She was not seen at the beach doing her trash pickup, and she didn't knock on anybody's door. And so by mid morning that day, the people of Betterton, all 120 of them, were
but
basically
she
out in
tripped
force
and fell
looking
into
for
like a
Monica.
trash
And at
compactor or some shit.
11:30 a.m., the police in Betterton got a call about Monica. It was this guy who was totally panicked. He could barely make a sentence, and he basically just told the police, "You gotta get here now." And so the police hopped in their cars and they sped to the address this guy gave them. And when they got there, they saw it was this very plain, boxy building that's kind of tucked back in the woods. It was far away from the town center, and really nobody ever went over here. And the police, when they parked their cars, they saw the guy who had called the police, the distraught caller, was standing outside of the front door. He was obviously crying, and he was waving for them to come over and follow him into this building. And so the police got out of their cars, they ran over to this guy, and they're asking him, what happened? Where's Monica? What's going on? But this guy was so hysterical, he really could not describe what happened to Monica. He just kept telling them to come on, follow me. And so he led them into this building, and pretty quickly they entered this huge warehouse where all across the ceiling were these big metal catwalk areas that kind of zigged and zagged all over this warehouse. And below them, all over the floor, were these huge industrial sized 15-foot tall vats that contained something. And so this
She
guy who had
fallen
led
one.
police here, he stops and he just points at the nearest vat. And so the police, picking up his cue, begin walking towards this vat. And as they got closer and closer, they were hit with this horrible smell that made them gag and cough. And before long, they had to
She been
stop
dead that
and
long?
kind of compose themselves. The smell was so bad. It would turn out this building that was kind of removed
Shouldn't
from
have
the
been
town center of
gone like
Betterton was Betterton's
few
sewage
hours.
treatment plant.
Oh,
And
it's a
that
sewage
morning,
treatment plant. Okay.
Monica had
So
gone to the
human
treatment
waste in
plant
there.
to help clean some of these
Oh,
15-foot
did she
tall
fall in that
industrial-sized
shit?
vats that contained human waste. She had done this enough times that when she was here, she did not need any supervision. And so that morning, she was
She
alone.
should still have a
She
buddy
climbed
with
up
her.
onto one of the catwalks over one of these big vats, and she had reached down with her testing kit to test the sewage to see how much cleaning it would need. And as she did that, she somehow slipped and fell into the big vat of human waste. Now, she would not have immediately gone under. It was not like a liquid. It was more like clay or really thick mud, where at first she would have kind of been laying on top of the sewage. But as soon as she tried to move to get out of the sewage would have functioned more like quicksand, where as soon as a part of her body went under the surface, it would not come up again. And so after the police composed
tell me
themselves,
she
they
drowned
climbed up
in
onto the
this
catwalk,
shit.
and they looked down and they saw Monica, who was face down, partially submerged inside of this vat, and she was deceased. Her autopsy would reveal that she died of drowning, which means she literally inhaled human waste.
Damn. That's it. Damn. That's crazy, that last one. Oh. Because I was thinking, I was like, when I remember that these are accidents, I was like, which one would I, like, if there was like, you have to die one of these ways, you pick one. I might pick number 2. Because number 1, I mean, he was in that closet for days with just cold water rushing on him. His skin was falling off. He was freezing. He probably died from hypothermia, probably most likely. And he was exhausted from trying to get out. And it just like, yeah, that one took too long. The second 2 were the shortest, but I don't know. The third one, she drowned in human feces. Now you could, if you would like stuck, you could, I guess, kill yourself and just hurry up and inhale a bunch of it and then drown, but it's still human feces, or just feces in general. It don't any feces. It's horrible. The second one though, it seemed from the way he was describing it, like it was happening pretty quickly. Like almost as soon as they landed, that heat from that furnace would hit them, and then they would basically burst into flames. I guess. So it's still you're dying engulfed in flames, but it's so hot that you probably die quickly. It's like probably like jumping in the lava. Like it'll be so. I mean, lava's not actually as quick as you think because jumping in the lava probably be like the third one when she fell in that shit. Like it's not like falling in the water and you gonna go straight down. You gonna hit first, and then you gonna feel that burn, and then you gonna start to sink, into it. But I think that'd be still faster than drowning in feces. Like he even says that she was only partly submerged. If she probably hadn't tried to get out and just laid, trying to like expand her body out as far as she can to keep herself on top of it, she might have been fine when they got there. She probably and they could have gotten her out of there. Cause I'm assuming there are workers. I don't know who that guy was that went to get the police. I'm assuming he worked there. Cause I'm like, does no one work here? Like, what is she doing? You would think like a waste management plant is a 24-hour business. Like, that's the thing that needs to be going constantly in a town or especially a city. And that's not like, oh, we closed today or we closed the weekends. Like, no, you're not closed. People don't stop taking shits because you're closed. You need to treat this water or this waste to filter it out, this water, so the water can go back, filtered and clean back into the reservoir or whatever. So, like, that shit is not it's a 24-hour business. But where are the workers? You would think if someone's cleaning that shit, there'd be somebody else there at least watching. I know people cut costs. Oh, one person can do that, but that'd be okay if you were in a building full of people, also other people doing it, and other people and they're doing other shit. Like like you the only one in the building during the day. And like I said, it should be a 24-hour business, so it shouldn't even matter. It's not like, oh, it's a weekend. It doesn't fucking matter. It shouldn't in that type of business. This should be a 24-hour, 7 days a week thing. So like, why are you the only one there? And then people noticed you were gone around mid morning. So I'm assuming probably like around 9 or 10, depending on. And I don't know when she got up, like to do this shit. Uh, so you've been missing like she got up at dawn, and she probably got up around 5, 6 o'clock. It's depending on the time of year too, but let's just say like 5 or 6, and then I guess she knocks on people's doors because people notice that she ain't knocking on my door. No one saw her at the beach picking up trash like she normally does. Um, so people start searching for her mid morning. So like I said, mid morning. I'm assuming like around 9 or 10 ish, and maybe a little bit, maybe 8 or 9. Because you talking about 9 or 10, I was like, hell, you got if you do 9, you got 2 hours until noon. Then it's afternoon. But but like you would think people. I mean, people notice like 'cause she was people are fond of her being around. So clearly, people instantly noticed that she was missing. That she was breaking routine for what she normally does. So that was unorthodox. So people's like, hey, where is she? We need to look for her. But like, I'm just like, where are the other workers? She's the only one doing it. And this water, this waste management, water like management, waste management type place. And she the only one in there. No one, but then this guy was in some. I'm assuming he's a worker too. Cause why was he there? It's like, but then with two people, is he the owner? Like, what the fuck? That is weird. I mean, I guess if there's not enough people in that town, they probably hey, we have to work. Uh, they don't have enough people to make it a 24/7 business. So they're like, hey, well, the amount of people we got, we work every day a week, but we only work for 8 hours. So, but still, like that. Yeah, I would probably, if I had to choose, I'd probably choose the second one. And that first one, I don't know what that neighbor, she should have. You hear that dude's doing all that screeching and yelling and screaming and hitting and shit. I would have called the police just for noise complaint. That'd been me. But especially if I hear all that. And then the second I would have noticed that I didn't hear anything, like if I'd have waited, let's say I would have waited, like, hey, okay. If I let's say I know that he broke up with his girlfriend or she broke up with him or whatever, and he might be having an episode. I was like, okay, I mean I probably go knock, make sure he don't kill himself. But if I hear all that noise and then I notice that I don't hear anything, I think I wouldn't. I would at least I would think for myself. It wouldn't be 2 days go by like, huh? I just realized I haven't heard anything. That's peculiar. Like I would think it would be like if he was constantly hitting the wall and screaming, and then I would think I would notice quicker if it was a constant thing and then it just stop. It's like hearing a hum, and then you constantly hear it all the time, and you hear it for days. You will usually pick up on that when it stops faster than if if it's not a continuous thing. Like every so often you might hear it or something like that. But if it's a continuous thing that's constantly happening over a course of a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it stops, you would notice that faster, you know, than the other way. But yeah, I'd probably go with the second one. Like if I had a choice. Like if I'd be like, I just fall on this thing and just burst into flames like a fucking vampire from Blade. But whew, these are rough. But anyway, hope y'all enjoyed my reaction one. If you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button down below. Make sure to subscribe if you're new here. Hit that bell if you want to be notified when I upload new videos. Comment down below. Share this video. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.